Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit more about Brexit. I want to talk in particular about two consequences of Brexit, serious consequences which are about to hit us in the coming months and which will make us even poorer. This is despite the fact that it's perfectly obvious to everyone that, with the exception of a few people at the top, everyone is getting poorer and life is getting much, much more difficult for us all in post-Brexit Britain. Before I do that, though, I'd just like to talk about a couple of stories I've seen this week. The first was really quite shocking, I thought. It was a report in the Daily Mail about how Rickets and Scurvy are coming back. There are cases of both. Rickets and scurvy are diseases which, as everybody knows, are diseases of malnutrition, lack of vitamins, particularly C and D, which were famous during Victorian times. These are Dickensian diseases, and they're coming back in Britain, global Britain of 2024. Partly as a consequence of that, life expectancy is falling. People are living shorter lives now as a result of poor nutrition, almost certainly. We also saw the story of the children going to school in overcoats and gloves because they couldn't afford to heat the schools. I mean, it's almost beyond belief. I mean, if we'd read about this in any other country, in some sort of East European country, we would have said, this is horrifying. Children go to school sitting all day in overcoats shivering and say they can't write properly because it's difficult to write with gloves on. I mean, what sort of education is that? And as Sir Michael Marmot, who's an expert on health inequality, said, Britain has become a poor country with some very rich people. It is worse to be poor in the UK than in Slovenia. It's terrible what is happening, absolutely terrible. And at the same time, we have this Prime Minister, this utterly idiotic Prime Minister, jumping up and down, grinning all over his face, telling us over and over again ad nauseum that his plan is working. His plan is what plan? A plan to destroy the economy. And you look at why it is that we're all so poor. It's not only inflation in prices, but it's energy prices. The average increase in energy prices throughout the EU is 41% since the war in Ukraine. In the UK, it's 215%. And the energy companies are making record profits. The government is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Our national debt has gone up from 1.03 trillion in 2010 to 2.686 trillion now. And this is staggering debt. Where's the money gone? It's been squandered here, there and everywhere, given to mates of Tories. Look at all the scandals, the PPE and the bounce back loans and the test and traced. Money just sprayed around amongst Tories who are getting richer and richer. Do you know, 9 of the water company bosses paid themselves £25 million in bonuses between 2019 and now. And they're going to raise water bills by £156 each by 2030 in order to pay for what they should have been paying for had they not dished out all the money amongst themselves. And you look at things, for example, like this business in Teesside, the Freeport. Absolute scandal. One of the biggest scandals ever. 2 men were sold for £100 assets from which they've already recovered in the first couple of years more than 100 million profit. And it's been investigated. But Michael Gove will not release the results of the investigation. Probably it will be released after the next general election. You look at, for example, BP was sold for $7.2 billion in 1987. It's since made $420 billion. The water companies were sold for $8.1 billion, and they've since made $152 billion. Royal Mail was sold for 1.98 billion, just 2 billion, and within 24 hours was worth 5 billion. And yet, we still have money to buy missiles to fire at Houthis in the Gulf. And above all, we've got money for tax cuts, especially tax cuts for rich people. I mean, this is just, as I say every week, it's just crazy. The incompetence of those who are in government is beyond. Well, you only had to watch Lucy Fraser and one or two of the others last week being interviewed to see their incompetence. I mean, it's just staggeringly incompetent. How so much damage could be done to one country in such a short time is almost beyond belief. It is almost credible that it's all been intentional, just destroy the country. But anyway, regarding the two big hits we're going to face, the first is concerns import controls, which I've talked about a lot before. I previously had a business where I was exporting to the EU, and the moment we left, import controls were imposed by the EU. So whenever I sent anything if I wanted to send anything to the EU, whereas previously I would have sent the goods to my customer would have paid me. That would have been that. Now, if once after Brexit, if I wanted to send some goods to the EU, I didn't, because nobody wanted to buy from me any longer. The customer in the EU would have to have registered with the government as an importer, would have had to have employed somebody to do documentation, some sort of agent, and they'd have had to pay extra transport because there would have been delays and stuff would have had to been held in a warehouse whilst the documentation was being done, and they'd have had to pay probably VAT on import and maybe some duties if part of the goods were from the UK. In other words, it made it so complicated that people throughout the EU didn't want to be bothered. The sort of customers I had certainly didn't want to be bothered with this unnecessary bureaucracy if they could buy elsewhere within the EU. Now, we haven't imposed such controls in the UK because, we just haven't got around to it, and because, as Rees-Mogg said, it would have been an act of self-harm to actually do it, because obviously it would obstruct trade. Well, as from the 1st of February, in a few days' time, we are going to have to start imposing import controls. And it'll be done gradually over the next few months. But once we do, Europeans are not going to want to be bothered. A lot of suppliers in Europe are not going to bother to supply the UK. UK importers are going to find it very much more difficult. There are going to be delays. Every lorry load of oranges that comes into the UK will have to be parked up whilst paperwork is done and the oranges go bad. And it's for so many suppliers, it's just not going to be worth it. And so we are absolutely certain to see very significant shortages of food in our supermarkets from the 1st of February. And bear in mind, 48% of all of our imports, goods and services, come from the EU. That is going to be severely hit. And not only that, those who do continue to supply the UK are going to put their prices up. I mean, what they want to charge for this inconvenience, all this bother, all these delays. As I've said before, how well we do, how much money we've got for health and education and transport and defence and everything else that the government spends money on, how much money we have depends upon how well our economy is operating and how successful our economy is. Our economy is made up of businesses. It's a question of the more successful, profitable businesses you've got, the more tax you can raise, the better standard of living you can provide. Governments, the absolute priority should be make it as easy as possible, as trouble-free as possible for businesses to operate. And yet Brexit was the biggest imposition of obstruction to business ever. And whilst until now it's been exporters that have really suffered because of all the hassle of exporting to the EU, it's now from February the 1st onwards, it's going to be importers who are going to be in trouble because there's going to be shortages of goods and prices are going up. And it's insane. When our economy is already so fragile, doing so badly, the fact that we know that it's going to get that much worse, I mean, it's frightening. The other matter which is going to hit us rather more gradually over the coming months is the number of companies that are on the brink of bankruptcy. Thousands and thousands of businesses. In fact, it's said that something like 500,000 businesses are struggling financially. 57,000 apparently are about to go bust. Now, as I've said before, I think when a business goes bust, you've got a business. For example, you're running a restaurant. You've got sort of 10 employees, and because of the economy, because no one's got any money these days, everybody's poor. Something like discretionary spending is limited. People got less money to go out to restaurants and so on. So your restaurant's not doing so well. So you find that you have to start laying people off. You have to start cutting down as much as you can. You perhaps can't open quite as often as you did previously, and you carry on with your business. You've got all your money invested in this business. Maybe it's a family business. You've got your money invested in the business. It's your pension. It's your future. It's everything. And so you want to hang on to it, and you want to believe all the time that things are going to get better. And so you hang on and hang on and hang on, thinking things are going to get better. And you find it's getting difficult to hang on, so you start borrowing money. The bank won't give you any more money, so you perhaps raise a bit on your house and on your mortgage. You extend it a bit, or you borrow from friends or from family, or you use whatever your savings you've got. And gradually, a business deteriorates more and more and more. You're doing less and less. You have to lay off more people. And eventually you can't carry on. Eventually you have to accept that it's not going to work. And so you close your business. And it's not just the end of your business and the people you're employing who are then unemployed. You've then got all the people that supplied you and your business. You've got your suppliers of your food and your drink and the laundry that does your tablecloths and the window cleaner and the guy that fixes the coffee machine and all these other businesses that depend upon your business. And so it is that every time a business goes down, it affects dozens, maybe hundreds of other businesses. And it becomes a sort of spiral. I think they talk about water around the plug hole. More and more businesses going and drag down more and more businesses, and it's a one way. It's very, very difficult to turn this around. And not only that, what it also results in is a great deal of unemployment, and I think that's going to be the next problem. We are in a very, very serious position. This was all predictable. It was all predicted. It was always so absolutely obvious. If you put up massive barriers to trade with your biggest, richest, strongest trade bloc in the world, with which you've been intimately involved for 45 years, if you create all those barriers, there are going to be consequences. And it's only now, and I think, and I've said this before, it's 2024. This year is the year we're going to see the real pain. It's very, very depressing, and I'm sorry to deliver such depressing news. But anyway, that's how I see it. If you've watched this far, thank you very much, as always. If you haven't already subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you do so. I really do need some more subscribers, and I'd be grateful. And so, until next time, thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.